when you think about India today, like what comes to mind? Probably IT, right? Like a global tech powerhouse.
Yeah, for sure.
But picture this. It's the 1930s, the Indian Statistical Institute, and the computers are, well, they're people.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, actual people
Mhm.
doing these huge calculations by hand, processing all this data from surveys. Can you imagine?
That's crazy.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And that journey from those human computers to like the India we know today, that's what we're diving into.
That's quite the transformation to explore.
So, you, our listener, you gave us this great collection of material on like the whole history of IT in India from the very beginning to like where they are now.
Mhm.
And we're going to be looking specifically at, against all odds, the IT story of India.
By S. Chris Gopalakrishnan,
Yep.
Nekta Dayasindhu, and Krishna Narayanan.
Exactly. And we're going to break it all down, find the big takeaways, like what were the key moments, what decisions mattered most, how did they like overcome all these challenges.
This book is like a deep dive into all of that, right? It's not just dates and names, it's the strategies, the risks they took.
Yeah. And like the surprises along the way, get ready for some serious aha moments. We're talking about a statistician who used like one of the very first computers in India to shape the country's economic plan.
Oh, way.
Yeah. And then there were government policies that, while they kind of messed things up for hardware, they actually helped create this boom in software.
Huh.
And then you have these incredible entrepreneurs who not only survived, but thrived on like this global scale. So we'll cover all that, plus the lessons we can learn from their story, because honestly, a lot of it is still so relevant today, even in our tech world.
What I find fascinating is how it's all connected, like government policy, the entrepreneurial spirit, and obviously the tech advancements themselves. The book shows how those things all kind of like work together.
For sure. So the book starts by shining a light on Professor P.C. Mahalanobis at the Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata. And get this, he's described as a physicist by training, a statistician by instinct, and a planner by conviction. So, yeah, pretty impressive. And he was the guy who used essentially the first computer in India for national planning.
Right. And Prime Minister Nehru, he was really into science and logic. So he was super impressed by Mahalanobis's ideas about economic development. He actually put Mahalanobis, the statistician, in charge of drafting the second five-year plan in 1955. It's a huge deal. And Mahalanobis, he used this computer, the HEC2M, to build these like really complex models to figure out where to invest to boost the economy. Pretty incredible when you think about it. A statistician and a computer shaping the country's future.
Yeah, and that kind of sets the stage, right? It shows that India, or at least some people in India, they saw the potential of computing really early on, even when the technology itself was like just getting started there. The book also talks about Homi Bhabha, and he was another one who really got it, the whole importance of computers for science and tech.
He even managed to get a copy of John von Neumann's report back in the early 50s and like instantly understood the idea of a stored program computer. And then there was TFRAC, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research Automatic Calculator.
Right, TFRAC.
India's first homegrown digital computer, inaugurated in 1962 by Nehru. So these guys, Mahalanobis and Bhabha, they were pioneers. They helped create this culture of like scientific thinking and innovation in India, which I think is a huge takeaway, recognizing the importance of these foundational technologies, even when it's not super clear how they'll be used, investing in the future, it can have a huge impact in the long run.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. The book talks about some like serious roadblocks and policy mistakes. There's one example, a report in the early 70s that could have opened the door for private companies to start making mini computers. Mini computers were kind of a big deal back then. They were like this alternative to these giant mainframes. And it seemed like a perfect opportunity for Indian companies to jump in. But things didn't exactly go as planned.
So this report gets submitted to the Department of Electronics in 73, but then it gets stuck in bureaucracy for like 5 years.
Oh, nice.
And by the time it finally gets released in 78, the whole tech landscape had already shifted. Mini computers were on their way out. Personal computers were on the rise.
Yeah.
Plus, the policy itself had this big flaw. It said that each company could only make 50 mini computers a year. They were worried about monopolies. But obviously, you can't really achieve much when you're limited like that. No economies of scale. And it just wasn't really practical for businesses. So good intentions, but they didn't really think it through, and they definitely didn't keep up with how fast technology was changing.
So like textbook example of like good intentions, but then like unintended consequences.
Oh, totally.
And it wasn't just Indian companies that suffered. IBM, which was like the big player back then, they ended up leaving India because of this policy.
That was a turning point, though. So IBM leaves, right? And it
Wow.
creates this vacuum. And Indian companies, they step in.
Really?
Yeah. H. Jalil, for example, they launched a microcomputer before Apple did. So even though the policy was meant to protect Indian companies, it actually ended up giving them a chance to grow because the competition was gone. It's funny how things work out sometimes. Like sometimes a setback can actually create an opportunity if you're ready to adapt.
That is pretty wild. So then the book paints this picture of the Indian IT industry in the 80s, and it wasn't pretty, especially for hardware. The regulations were just too much. But this is where the Indian entrepreneurial spirit really shines through. They faced this huge challenge, right, with hardware. So they just shifted their focus.
Yeah, they moved to software, less regulations, and the global demand was starting to explode.
It's a smart move.
And the government's import policies actually encouraged this. So if you imported a computer, you paid a 35% import duty if you promised to export software. But if you imported hardware, it was a 150% duty.
Wow. That is a big difference.
Yeah, so that kind of pushed companies towards software exports. Plus, there are all these stories about the bureaucratic hurdles companies had to jump through. Like N.R. Narayana Murthy, one of the founders of Infosys, he talks about trying to get a license to import a data general computer. Tons of trips to Delhi, delays, and by the time he got the license, the computer was cheaper and more powerful.
That sounds like a nightmare.
And even then, there were customs officials asking for bribes.
It's just insane, the hoops they had to jump through.
Yeah.
But they persisted, right? I mean, Infosys and TCS, they were out there laying the groundwork for what would become a huge success story. The book talks about how the Infosys founders, they lived Superman at work tirelessly to get clients and deliver projects.
Yeah, you see that a lot with successful companies. They start with very little, a lot of passion, and a ton of hard work.
Exactly. And what about that employee stock ownership plan that Infosys started? That seems like it was pretty groundbreaking.
The ESOP, yeah. It was huge. Basically, it gave employees at all levels a chance to own a piece of the company, a real sense of ownership. S.D. Shibulal, he talks about how the goal was to make employees feel invested in the company's success. And it totally worked. People were motivated and a lot of them became wealthy because of it. And then in 1999, Infosys goes public on NASDAQ, first Indian company to do that.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, so the takeaway there is think about how you compensate your people. Give them a stake in the game. It can make all the difference.
So let's zoom out a bit. Big picture. What does the book say were the key factors that led to India's success in IT, specifically with software?
So a few things. The government started to liberalize the economy a bit in the 80s. That helped create a better environment for business.
Okay, makes sense.
Then in the 90s, you had this huge global shift from a manufacturing economy to a knowledge economy. Perfect timing for India. They had the skills and the world suddenly needed those skills.
Right place, right time.
Exactly. And then remember Y2K. That turned out to be a massive opportunity for Indian IT companies.
Oh yeah, Y2K. The whole world was worried about computers crashing.
Right. And Indian companies stepped up, showing they could handle these huge, complex projects for big international clients. And once they proved themselves, they got even more business.
So it was like this global trust-building exercise.
Exactly. And then you had multinational companies setting up their own centers in India.
Because they saw the talent there.
Right. Lower costs, too. And it wasn't just back office stuff either. They were doing R&D, cutting-edge work. So the takeaway is, show you can deliver on a global scale, and the partnerships will follow.
Got it. And what about the government's focus on e-governance? That seemed to play a role too, right?
Yeah, big time. It modernized government services, made things easier for people, but it also got more people comfortable with using technology. So it kind of created this positive feedback loop. More demand for tech, more people using it, more growth. The book also talks about specific ministries like the Department of Information Technology and proactive state governments that really help the industry grow. Shows how important that collaboration between government and industry can be.
It's really cool how it all came together. And the book even mentions how well the Indian IT industry handled the recent global crisis. They adapted to remote work seamlessly.
Oh, yeah, they were way ahead of the curve on that. Mars Incorporated, they were super impressed with the global delivery model. The team stayed focused, kept delivering, even improved productivity. And Infosys, they saw a surge in demand for things like cloud computing and automation because their clients were suddenly forced to go digital faster. So again, adapt and improve. That's the key.
Okay, so what are some of the biggest takeaways, the most practical advice from the book?
I'd say first, recognize the importance of early visionaries, like those guys who saw the potential of computing way back when they set the stage.
Right.
Second, be aware of the impact of government policies. They can help or hurt, sometimes in ways you don't expect. Third, resilience and adaptability. The Indian IT industry, they faced so many challenges, but they kept finding ways to succeed. And fourth, invest in your people. Build a strong culture, focus on quality, and build those strategic partnerships. Those are the pillars of their success.
You know, you, our listener, you're clearly someone who likes to learn about these big success stories. And we hope this deep dive gave you a good overview of how the Indian IT industry got to where it is today.
And hopefully, it'll make you want to learn even more.
Exactly. What I keep coming back to is just how adaptable they had to be. The tech was changing, policies were changing, they had to keep evolving. And then, like, the sheer determination of those early entrepreneurs. They had a vision and they didn't give up. And that whole focus on talent, that's something you see over and over again in successful companies.
Absolutely. You can't underestimate the importance of a skilled and motivated workforce.
So here's something to think about. The Indian IT story isn't just about technology. It's about human ingenuity. It's about how policy can shape an industry. And it's about how interconnected our world has become. And as technology keeps changing, what lessons can we learn from this story? What can we apply to the future of innovation?
That's a great question. And I think the book gives us a lot to think about.
Now, for those of you watching on YouTube, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Indian IT story, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Book Reviews 1 for more deep dives on fascinating topics. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you the most about the evolution of Indian IT?
Yeah, let us know.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.